Hi everyone, and welcome to the predictions for the week of September 9, 2019, and these are based on astrological transits and some past events that had occurred during similar transits. So for the entire week, as before, we have two major influences, the Saturn conjunct Pluto in Capricorn, and that would coincide with sort of ongoing background influences, something like large earthquakes, changes in the government leadership, restructuring among large corporations. I've heard something about Alcoa, I guess, which its business also has to do with, like, I guess, aluminum and metals in general, which also are covered by Saturn, Capricorn, etc. So companies like that undergoing restructuring, or governmental structures basically changing, like I said, leadership, who's in power, or countries maybe changing sort of long-term partnerships where some old partnerships basically cease to be, and or some old leaders are removed, and or new powers rise to be. And this is something that's going to be with us through 2020, and like I said, this is ongoing influence. We do expect some intensification around mid-September, which, like I said, maybe will coincide with an increased number of certain disasters that have to do with collapses of like large buildings, anything that's made out of stone and metals. And we have seen, of course, some of these structures crumbled with strong hurricane winds, as well as, I guess, just ongoing disasters that unfortunately take a lot of lives, because Saturn is currently near nodes of the moon, conjuncting one opposing the other, and that usually has to do with like mass events that involve large amounts of people, masses of people rather, and that is again something that's going to be with us for the next few weeks, but including this week. And speaking of hurricanes and in general flooding, events that involve excess water and or just maybe events related to Neptune in general, so something along the lines of, oil shipping disruptions or production disruptions. Again, we have Bahamas, we have hurricane, and there was some major oil spill threatening marine life and just well-being of people, contamination of soil, Saturn, and water, of course, again, more Neptune. And we have heard some events about like ships capsizing or catching on fire. And basically this is something that is, again, ongoing background influence, again, emphasis on Neptunian topics such as oil, water, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, as well as beverages, religious places of some sort, perhaps also music, movies, industries in those areas. We have heard some, movie, I think, coming up recently that was, I guess, the best or the second best scoring in September. So basically these will be the prominent topics again this week and next week, and this influence basically has been coinciding with the ongoing transit that was with us since April of 2019, and that's Neptune squaring Jupiter, Neptune and Pisces, Jupiter in Sagittarius. So again, international shipments, problems with international shipments, transportation. We had the British Airways, I guess, pilots going, staff more generally going on strike, and again disrupting some shipments, or rather even transportation. And of course we had also a hurricane, or rather typhoon, in Tokyo, disrupting flights there as well. So we will basically, we have been seeing intensification of some of these kind of events, especially when this aspect between Neptune and Jupiter was exact, which was in April, subsequently in June, and now again in September. So news that again involve especially oil, but particularly a disruption of something. Maybe there is too much of commodity in one place, but it cannot be shipped, or there is a shipment in process, but there's a problem, like we have heard about various maritime disasters, like I guess some ship capsized, and therefore I think it was ship operated either for Hyundai or something like that. And basically there's another recent event in California where many people unfortunately perished in the fire. Yet another boat, I guess, either caught a fire, also capsized, and I guess of course of Georgia. So we have some of these kind of events that relate to water, but and or oil, and or bad weather that involves either ships, navy, events that occur over the water, etc., or associated with water. But because of the square being the transit tense aspect between these two planets, we can expect either, like I said, excessive, amount of water in one place and perhaps drought in another place, or something that doesn't go quite well. Now, this particular week, especially at the end of the week, around the 12th, 13th, 14th, we will actually have Mars in Virgo joining sort of this square by opposing Neptune. So this further intensifies this particular influence and brings the element of, again, what's Mars? Fire, sort of explosions, attacks, accidents. We already had upcoming, to this time, we already had increased news about various ships basically catching fire, and or events that have to do with like ships or occurring over water experiencing some problems that maybe are sudden, or suddenly boat overturns and there's a fire again unexpectedly. So things that happen very quickly. Mars basically is a quick action, quickly comes and quickly goes. But as much as we kind of have been already seeing at the onset of these events, there will definitely be more. And haven't heard rather any news about any new hurricanes or typhoons coming up, especially going into the areas that necessarily produce oil. But I still expect, again, through the end of September, this influence is going to be quite strong. And again, this week, 12, 13, into 14, it will continue to intensify with, again, either just fires, explosions, oil leaks and or gas leaks, and there's an explosion, the big, in conjunction with that background influence that involves Saturn and Pluto and the moon nodes. We may expect it to affect large number of people. So maybe like I said, the gas leak at a place where it may affect, unfortunately, many people and results perhaps in a large building going down or some metal structure, just like what we had in when Hurricane Dorian went over Canada. There was a crane that fell into a building, and again, we have this metal large structure, and it's falling on a concrete sort of building or whatever that building was made out of. So basically tunnels, bridges, anything, water erosion, like dam or something like that, like large structures that are meant to stand for a long time, may particularly be susceptible to this influence. So that's ongoing background influence. Similarly, this week we will have, with so many planets in Virgo, we will continue having a strong sort of focus, especially in like a stock market, or I guess just news in general, on like things like healthcare, natural treatments, livestock, workforce. Again, we have this news about strikes in various places, and basically workforce. I guess there was a report coming up recently in the US. Again, I actually don't follow which reports come out when. I literally just look at astrological transits, and that's what I base my predictions off of. But then I read the news, or headlines rather, to see what had or hadn't come up. So continuing influence this week on service industries and governmental contracts. So basically contracts that either involve, again, service industries like nurses, teachers, firefighters, police, etc., and or such groups demanding people who are actually doing the work, demanding maybe better conditions, just like what we saw with recently there was AT&T strike, now the British Airways strike. So people who are like considered to be part of the machinery, for either government or for large corporations, perhaps there will be news about kind of their rights, because we have, again, Mars will also be squaring from Virgo, which has to do with workforce, squaring Jupiter in Sagittarius, which has to do with like rights, legal issues, and long distance transportation. So those areas may be affected. Like I said, people who are maybe working for transportation industries, or people who are maybe in service industry demanding their legal rights somehow, or changes in their legal rights or legal status. So let's see. Also healthcare workers, as I mentioned, nurses, or really any other healthcare workers. And there may be either some sort of overreaction or demands or strikes or protests, again, because of some legal issues, or demanding some legal status, and or because of the involvement of Neptune. It may involve things like, drug abuse, or, drug testing, chemicals, maybe exposure to chemicals, or maybe somebody's demanding to have safer working conditions, and or there's some lie or deception. Maybe one thing is promised and then some other thing basically is delivered. And or there might also be increased news about infectious diseases, especially those that are transmitted over through water, and or relate to things like fever, and or somehow involve like livestock or animals. As well as just generally increase in like fires, explosions, arguments, and focus on weapons and attacks, but particularly, like I said, involving water, navy, sort of ships, and or chemicals, like chemical attacks, for example. So as I mentioned before, September is looking to be quite an important month, and I had predicted this back in my annual predictions. And for September, like I said, the intensification of issues related to excessive water, oil, problems maybe with chemicals, pharmaceuticals, international transportation, sort of international agreements, and basically negotiations will be quite important. The particular dates of importance will be or have been already September 2nd through 3rd, 8th through 14th, and this week especially 9, 11, and 12 through 14th. And in the upcoming weeks, September 19, 22 through 23, and September 27th through 28th, which 22nd through 28th in general, this sort of last bit of September, hold in particular high risk for major geopolitical conflicts between countries, or something what we see, some protests in Hong Kong, something that has to do with shifts, like I said, in the leadership in the government, or rewriting of borders, or basically who's in control, and or some natural disasters globally, and particularly for the US, such as I mentioned before, major earthquakes or some hurricanes or some other similar problems. Let's see, so for oil, particularly September 12th through 14th, especially 13th through 14th, may be important dates where we may see some major either market drop or really strong market volatility with large swings in the market, and especially large moves in the oil. Again, this could be due to problems with weather and problems with shipment of oil, or problems with some sort of international negotiations or agreements, and basically those may affect either oil production, distribution, or prices. And I do see that the prices have recently been going down, but actually the aspects that we have, they do may symbolize, or rather could manifest through actually prices going up, because again, some problems with shipment, problems with production, or some imbalance where there's a shortage in one place, accumulation in another. So I guess my expectation is that we will see overall in September increase in oil, especially with some sort of developments mid-September, and or also September 22nd through 28th, especially 27th through 28th, may see some sort of either event or disaster, maybe related to oil, maybe another hurricane, and that may significantly affect oil prices. So some specific predictions for individual countries. For China, and ongoing influence that may result in increased sort of earthquakes or various disasters, problems, and or sort of changes related to oil, navy, pharmaceuticals, pollution, secrets, or some deceptive illegal activities, long distance transportation, especially over water or railroad, and international agreements and expansion on the international scale. This week, the peak days for this influence are September 12th through 13th. And then there are two ongoing sort of influences for both the US and China, which in a way are a little bit parallel, because again, there are certain planets that are in similar degrees in both of these countries' charts. And that is ongoing influence from August 19th through about November 5. For, I guess, the next week for US, the peak days, not peak days, but for September will be September 16th through 18th. And for China will be again next week, September 17th through 18th, so similar dates. And this may show or manifest rather as ongoing conflicts with partners, some intense negotiations, power struggles, important public announcements, especially for the US, about especially leaders or sort of a leadership on a global scale, and finances, banks, as well as legal, sort of either immigration related announcements or about judges, laws, legal actions, long distance travel, or international shipments. And for China, again, focus maybe again on some sort of conflicts, power struggles, changes in, I guess, partnership agreements, and at the same time also, like I said, earthquakes, accidents, various disasters, and there may be pressure to make some changes that basically involve cutting losses, reducing either the number of partners, reducing a number of sort of things that perhaps China is agreeing to in their agreements with partners, or perhaps reducing something that is meant to reduce the waste, reduce pollution, reduce of number of destinations perhaps to where people can travel. So some sort of tightening of control or reduction of waste, basically cutting off all the junk and or cutting losses and or strengthening controls or restructuring something to basically eliminate waste, again, for better or worse particular type of disasters that may occur, again, like I said, earthquakes, but also anything to do with like underground activities or illegal activities. So anything to do, say, with literally underground mining, like a mine collapse, or some problems due to underground illegal activities, be it, some spying, hacking, or, just deceptive kind of activities, illegal agreements, or trafficking, or something of that nature. So let's see, for individual days of the week for September 9, and I'm actually recording this on September 9 afternoon already. I did post the predictions the day before in my blog at tolstunka.com. My prediction was today for the market was that it would go down, about 65% probability, and there was actually a mixed result where Nasdaq was down, but Dow Jones was slightly up. And as I predicted, I'm going focus on oil, gas, pharmaceuticals, chemicals, so we have quite a few news about that. And the entire week, as I mentioned, increased focus on wet weather, oil, maritime accidents, etc. And this will continue and perhaps even intensify through the rest of the month, including the very end of the month. And like I said, potentially oil may go up due to, again, I expect there'll be future additional problems, perhaps related to transportation or distribution of oil, and or just natural disasters that may disrupt oil production, like I said, or oil rigs, shipments, etc. So for US, this week is also quite important, and it is, as an individual country, also going to receive some transits to its chart that also signify increased focus on oil, navy, pharmaceuticals, wet weather, etc. All these Neptunian topics, as well as banks, real estate, food safety, farming, homeland security, leaders, and power status on the world. So some home local issues will also be quite important. And again, focusing on leaders, on safety, security of its farmers, safety and security of its borders, food safety, growing crops, and or literally just protecting land, maybe land from natural disasters and or from, again, problems that may affect food production, as well as banks, and particularly banks' savings, are savings secure and protected, or are banks' assets in, say, real estate, secure. For Tuesday and Wednesday, I predict that there is a slight chance, about 55 to 60% chance, that the market will actually go up, and it will likely be if there are news, which I expect during those 2 days. There might be increased news on not only just these same topics, oil, pharmaceuticals, chemicals, etc., but also on communication and transportation and retail sales. And so in those areas, especially on Wednesday, we may actually have some good news, either increased earnings or some agreements are being reached, or at least financial deals are being, in the talks. Even if they're not reached, there might be some positive news about things kind of proceeding well, at least from sort of diplomatic perspective. Maybe nothing is kind of finalized, and there are no exact details, but the overall talks may be proceeding well, and there's some positive communication. And so I believe it may affect actually market, and especially on Tuesday, and probably on Wednesday, especially on Wednesday and probably on Tuesday as well, where it may be going up. Even though for areas, like I said, oil, gas, pharmaceuticals, and chemicals, and as well as shipments, there may be continuing negative news about like problems with shipments, accidents, fires, and so forth. So let's see. And more generally, midweek, mid to late week, I guess September 11th through 13th, like I said, there may be news about, increased news about communication transportation businesses, and initially we may hear these positive news where the discussions are going well, but perhaps starting maybe by 13th, there may be a reversal where I guess this initial information may be not necessarily sufficient for market to continue going up, and it may start as early as the 12th, but especially on the 13th, where maybe there's going to be some disillusionment where, okay, we had this great kind of a start, everybody sort of communicating happily, but what is the exact result? What are the exact items of agreement? And that actually may be unclear, and there may be no sort of closure and no real action, and that I think may bring the market down by the 13th, which is Friday, and Thursday, the 12th, may be this reversal day where perhaps market is still going up in the morning, but then turns down on the afternoon, and or by Friday we will see some, again, probably a big drop. And specifically on Friday, the time right at the close of the business day, around the 3 p.m. New York time, there's going to be potentially a reversal of some sort, or a really major announcement, or if maybe there are talks, there may be, or a report is about to come out, there may be some big announcement, and may either cause a reversal in the market at that particular time, right, literally in the last hour of trading, and or really intensify, say there's a big drop, it's going to be really intense at that time for some reason, maybe, at the end of the week, people will be just selling their stocks, or basically some sort of a big event. I guess usually it's not, I guess, unheard of at the end of the day on Friday, but at this time, again, 3 p.m. New York time, Friday seems to be quite an important time in terms of various important announcements, issues about oil, again, pharmaceuticals, gas, just accidents, and all of that. Let's see. So Thursday, reversal day, but Friday definitely kind of looks to me like a major down day. And generally speaking, the entire week, especially Thursday and Friday, seem to be days where we'll have a lot of announcements, either about international agreements, either communication transportation businesses, as well as oil, gas, pharmaceuticals, navy, sort of shipments, and international agreements. And those may, like I said, potentially be so important, and they will move the market, and in my opinion, it most likely will be down. And so glance ahead, like I said, September will be a fairly stressful month in my opinion, both because of the weather as well as various developments internationally. But October 5th through 6th will actually see also fairly strong developments, potentially strong market moves, as well as increased probability of earthquakes, accidents, disasters, and they may involve, again, Saturnian sort of vibes, where we are talking about earth, soil, mining, old structures, and or government leaders continue sort of either passing away or being removed, or basically potentially some sort of accident that involves large loss of life. And there may also be some surprising changes in the financial sector, surprising or I guess final sort of decisions made in some international agreements, like a final deal is reached, but it's reached under pressure, sort of like an ultimatum, and things just can't get any worse, and so the deal must be reached, and or the deal involves change in governmental leadership, so maybe a leader is removed and therefore deal is reached, or the deal is reached under condition that some leader is removed. And accidents also may involve accidents, or I guess agreements, or problems potentially may involve areas related to airlines, airspace, IT, telecoms, social media, so any sort of communication, transportation, but with focus on anything that's like electronic or high-tech, involving various gadgets and electronic processing. And there may be some surprises, sudden changes, and or accidents potentially due to high winds or moving objects moving too fast, so maybe loss of communication due to, again, really large, wind, and or perhaps airline accidents due to, again, some problems with weather involving high winds. So that's it for me for this week, and I hope you enjoyed this, my rambling again, and I hope you come back for next time. And until then, see you guys, bye.